The conversation at our dinner table had been going on for 20 minutes, and I hadn't been allowed to contribute a single word. My husband David's business partners spoke around me like I was a decorative centerpiece, occasionally patting my hand when I tried to interject. "So it's settled then," Richard Blackstone announced, cutting into his perfectly grilled salmon. "Thursday's dinner at La Bernardine will be just the partners. We'll finally close the Morrison deal." "Absolutely," agreed Thomas Chen, raising his wine glass. "No distractions this time." David shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Actually, Juliet might have some insights on the Morrison proposal. She's quite knowledgeable about." "I'm sure she is," Richard's wife Patricia interrupted with a condescending smile. "But Thursday is about serious business discussions. You understand, don't you, dear?" I understood perfectly. After 3 years of marriage to David, I'd attended dozens of these dinners where the men discussed million-dollar deals while their wives and I were expected to smile, look pretty, and discuss shopping. "Besides," Thomas added, not even looking at me, "La Bernardine has a 3-month waiting list. We were lucky Richard could get us a table at all." "Very lucky," I murmured, taking a sip of my wine, a 2015 Chassagne Montrachet that they'd ordered without asking my opinion, despite the fact that I'd trained under the sommelier who'd curated this very wine list. "Don't look so glum, Juliet," Patricia stage whispered. "We wives are having our own dinner at that new sushi place. You can tell us all about your little cooking blog." My little cooking blog. The one that had quietly become one of the most influential food publications in the city, though I wrote under a pseudonym. The one where I'd recently published a scathing review of the new sushi place that had resulted in its chef having a public meltdown on Twitter. "That sounds lovely," I lied, catching David's apologetic glance. "Seriously though, David," Richard leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his self-importance. "Wives at business dinners are a distraction. Remember what happened with Morrison's wife at the last quarterly meeting?" "She corrected his math," I said quietly. "Exactly," Richard boomed, missing my point entirely, completely derailed the presentation. "Morrison was humiliated. Because his projections were off by 30%, I added. Richard waved dismissively. "Details. The point is, Thursday needs to be focused, professional. No offense, sweetheart, but you probably wouldn't understand half of what we discuss anyway." "None taken," I replied, though David's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. He knew better. He'd seen me review restaurant PLS in my sleep, negotiate with suppliers in 3 languages, and build something from nothing, but his partners saw only what they wanted to see, a pretty young wife who must have married up. "Where is this dinner again?" I asked innocently. "La Bernardine," Thomas repeated slowly, as if I might have trouble with the French pronunciation. "It's a very exclusive restaurant, Michelin stars, impossible reservations, the whole 9 yards." "I've heard of it," I said mildly. Patricia laughed. "Of course you have, dear. Everyone's heard of La Bernardine, though I doubt any of us could get a table without Richard's connections." "My college roommate knows the maitre d'," Richard bragged. "Took some serious string pulling, but for the Morrison deal, worth it." The waiter appeared to refill our wine glasses, and I noticed the subtle way his eyes widened when he saw me. Philippe, one of my former sous chefs who'd moved to this restaurant after I'd recommended him. I gave him the tiniest shake of my head, and he smoothly continued his service without acknowledgement. "Speaking of La Bernardine," Patricia continued, "did you all see that review in the Times last month? They called it a transcendent temple to French cuisine. Can you imagine creating something like that?" "The chef must be a genius," Thomas's wife, Linda, sighed dreamily. "I heard she trained in Paris under Ducasse himself." "She?" Richard scoffed. "The executive chef is some guy named Bernard something." "Bernard Laurent is the executive chef de cuisine," I corrected gently. "The chef owner is someone else." "Whatever," Richard dismissed. "Point is, Thursday's dinner will be at the best restaurant in the city, with just the serious players. No offense, ladies, but million-dollar deals require a certain atmosphere." "An atmosphere without women?" I asked. "An atmosphere without distractions," Thomas corrected, though his smile was patronizing. "You have to understand, Juliet, business at this level is complex. It's not like running a household or planning a dinner party." David's grip on my hand tightened. He'd watched me plan dinner parties for 300 people, orchestrate service that ran like clockwork, manage budgets that would make his partner's deals look like pocket change, but I'd asked him to keep my secret, and he had. "Of course," I said smoothly, "I'm sure your dinner will be everything you hope for." The conversation moved on to other topics, their golf games, their portfolios, their important connections. I contributed appropriate nods and smiles while mentally reviewing Thursday's menu. We were debuting a new tasting course that night, and my sous chef had been nervous about the soufflé timing. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled David aside. "Seriously, man, leave the little woman at home Thursday. This is big boy stuff." "Juliet understands," David replied tightly. "Good man." Richard clapped him on the shoulder. "La Bernardine, 7 sharp. Don't be late, you know how these fancy places are about punctuality." I knew exactly how these fancy places were about punctuality. I'd written the reservation policy myself. Thursday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn evening that made the city shine. I stood in my office above La Bernardine's kitchen, watching through the one-way glass as my staff prepared for service. The kitchen moved like a ballet, each person knowing exactly their role in the choreography I'd designed. "Chef," my maitre d' knocked softly, "the Blackstone party has arrived. Table 7, as you requested." "Thank you, Henri." I tied my apron, the one with the subtle JL monogrammed on the chest, my actual initials, Juliette Laurent, though everyone assumed it stood for someone else. "Send the amuse-bouche with my compliments. I'll be down shortly." Through the security monitor, I watched Richard and his group settle into their seats, already loud with self-importance. David looked uncomfortable, checking his phone repeatedly. He'd texted me 6 times already, apologizing again for not defending me more strongly. "It's fine," I'd replied. "Enjoy your dinner." If only he knew how much I meant it. I made my way down to the kitchen, where my team snapped to attention. 3 years of anonymity had been challenging but necessary. I'd wanted to build something on my own terms, without the baggage of being David's wife or dealing with investors who thought a woman couldn't possibly run a kitchen of this caliber. "First course out in 5, I called, moving to the pass to inspect each plate. "Let's show table 7 why we have 3 Michelin stars." The dance began. Course after course flew out of the kitchen, each one a small masterpiece. Through the service window, I could see Richard's table growing quieter with each dish, their business discussion forgotten in the face of culinary perfection. "Chef," Philippe appeared at my elbow. "Table 7 is asking about wine pairings for the 5th course. Send Henri, tell him to recommend the Burgundy, but let them think it's their idea." I watched Henri work his magic, Richard predictably choosing the exact wine I'd suggested, then bragging to the table about his sophisticated palate. David, I noticed, had barely touched his 4th course. He kept glancing around the restaurant as if looking for something, or someone. "Chef, we have a problem." My sous chef Marcus rushed over. "The soufflé for table 12 collapsed. We need to restart, but that'll throw off the timing for switch 12 and 7. I decided quickly. Give 7 the intermezzo early, tell them it's a special palate cleanser. That gives us 20 minutes for the new soufflé. "Yes, chef." This was what Richard and his boys' club would never understand. Running a restaurant at this level wasn't about having connections or writing checks. It was about split-second decisions, managing chaos, leading through crisis. Every service was $1 million deal, except the stakes were higher: people's celebrations, their memories, their trust. "Table 7's ready for the meat course," Marcus reported. I moved to the grill station, personally plating each portion of the A5 Wagyu that Richard had bragged about ordering. As I worked, I thought about Patricia's comment about not understanding serious business. If only she knew that this single dinner service would generate more revenue than most of David's quarterly deals. "Chef," Henri reappeared, looking concerned. "Table 7 is insisting on meeting you. Mr. Blackstone is being quite vocal about it." I smiled. "Tell them the chef will visit after the dessert course, as is traditional." Henry's eyes sparkled with understanding. "Of course, chef." The final courses proceeded flawlessly. Richard's table had gone through 6 bottles of wine, the business discussion long abandoned in favor of increasingly slurred proclamations about the food. David, I noticed, had switched to water 3 courses ago. As the dessert plates were cleared, I untied my apron and straightened my chef's whites. 3 years of anonymity were about to end, but on my terms, in my restaurant. "Ready, chef?" Marcus asked. "Let's not keep Mr. Blackstone waiting. He does hate distractions during important dinners." I walked through my dining room, accepting quiet congratulations from other tables, until I reached table 7. The men looked up with the satisfied stupor of those who'd eaten exceptionally well. "Gentlemen," Henri announced formally, "may I present the chef-owner of La Bernardine, Juliette Laurent." The silence was absolute. Richard's wine glass slipped from his hand, burgundy spreading across the pristine white tablecloth like blood. Thomas's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The other partners stared as if I'd materialized from thin air. David, my wonderful husband, tried to hide his grin behind his napkin. Juliet? Richard finally managed. But you're a wife, I suggested helpfully. A distraction? Someone who wouldn't understand serious business discussions? You own La Bernardine? Thomas whispered. But we thought, the reservation, my friend said. Your friend told you what you wanted to hear, I said simply, that a man named Bernard ran the kitchen. He does. Bernard is my executive chef de cuisine. But this? I gestured to the restaurant around us. This is mine, built from scratch, funded by my cookbook sales and that little cooking blog Patricia found so amusing. The Times Review, one of the other partners breathed. They said the chef was a ghost, never did interviews, never revealed themselves. I prefer my food to speak for itself, I replied, though I must admit, it's been educational hearing your opinions about women in business while eating at my table. Richard's face had gone from red to white to an interesting shade of green. We didn't mean, that is, we weren't talking about you. Of course you were, I said gently, you just didn't know it. Tell me, Richard, how was your $1 million meal? Did my silly female brain manage to create an atmosphere conducive to serious business? The Morrison deal, Thomas said faintly. We completely forgot to discuss the Morrison deal. Funny how that happens when you're not distracted by wives, I observed. David, darling, are you ready to go? I believe Patricia's dinner at that new sushi place should be wrapping up. David stood, his pride evident. Actually, I texted Patricia earlier, warned her about your review of that place. They went to Mario's instead. My review? Richard looked confused. What review? JL, Laurent, David said simply, the most influential food critic in the city, also my wife. You're JL, Laurent? Thomas grabbed the table for support, but that review destroyed Kenzo's career. He closed his restaurant. He served tuna that wasn't sushi grade and tried to pass it off as authentic Japanese cuisine. I said, people could have gotten sick. But don't worry, your dinner tonight was prepared to the highest standards. We take our responsibilities seriously here. Henri appeared with their check, presenting it with a flourish. Richard reached for it automatically, then froze as he saw the total. Don't worry, I said sweetly, I gave you the friends and family discount. Only a 30% markup instead of our usual 50% for exclusive private rooms. Private room? Richard looked around, but we're in the main dining room. Are you? I smiled. Take another look. They turned, finally noticing what David had observed halfway through dinner, the subtle screens that had been deployed, the way other diners were seated just far enough away, the acoustic dampening that had given them privacy while maintaining the illusion of the bustling restaurant. You see, I explained, I understand the importance of atmosphere for business discussions. I just also understand that excluding half the population from those discussions is bad business. Juliet, Richard started, then stopped, clearly at a loss. Thank you for dining at La Bernardine, I said formally. I hope your next business dinner is everything tonight wasn't, forgettable, ordinary, and exclusively male, though you might have trouble finding a restaurant of this caliber that meets those criteria. You see, quite a few of the city's best chefs are women. We talk, we support each other, and we remember who respects us and who doesn't. Are you blacklisting us? Thomas asked in horror. Of course not, I replied. You're welcome here anytime, but you might find it difficult to get those exclusive reservations you prize so highly. Henri, please see that Mr. Blackstone's party has their coats. As we walked toward the exit, David took my hand. That was magnificent, he murmured. That was necessary, I corrected, though I do feel bad about one thing. What's that? They never got to try the soufflé. It's really quite spectacular when it doesn't collapse. Behind us, I heard Richard struggling with the check, Thomas frantically calling other restaurants, and the sound of several extremely expensive business relationships crumbling like a poorly made pastry crust. Juliet, Richard called after us. Wait, please, we need to discuss. I'm sorry, I said, turning back with my sweetest smile, but I have an early morning tomorrow. You understand, I'm sure. After all, wives aren't invited to serious discussions. The door closed on his protests, and David and I stepped out into the crisp autumn evening. 3 years of anonymity had ended exactly as I'd planned, not with a whisper, but with a 5-course feast of revelation. So, David asked as we walked toward our car, what are you going to do now that everyone knows? I thought about it, breathing in the city air that smelled of possibility and just a hint of roasted garlic from my restaurant. I think I'll start with that interview the Times has been begging for. Maybe a cookbook focusing on women chefs who built their own empires. Oh, and I should probably call Patricia. Let her know she's always welcome at La Bernardine. Without her husband. That's cruel. David laughed. That's business, I corrected, the serious kind. The kind that apparently requires a very specific atmosphere, one where talent matters more than chromosomes and creativity counts more than connections. My phone buzzed with texts, Henri reporting that Richard had left a 50% tip in what appeared to be shock, Marcus confirming that tomorrow's reservations were still fully booked, and my network of chef friends asking if the rumors were true. Any regrets? David asked as we reached our car. I looked back at La Bernardine, my name finally glowing where it belonged on the discreet brass plaque by the door. 3 Michelin stars, 5 years of blood and burns and 18-hour days, all built while people like Richard assumed I was playing housewife. Just one, I admitted. What's that? I should have charged them full price. David laughed, pulling me close. There's my ruthless businesswoman. Distraction, I corrected, kissing him. I believe the term they used was distraction. The most delicious distraction in the city, he agreed. As we drove away, I saw Richard and his group still standing outside La Bernardine, looking lost and slightly hungry, as if they'd eaten a 5-star meal but somehow missed the point entirely. They'd learned an expensive lesson tonight: never underestimate the person who controls your food, and never, ever, tell a chef she's not invited to dinner. Especially when she owns the table you're eating at.